Hello and welcome back, Heir of Carthage here, and we're going to do another State of the Faction video. And today, it's going to be a very unique faction. I think one that many of you will be interested in. Yes, we're going to be talking about Bretonnia. So if you're feeling a sudden urge to fight for the lady, then you're in the right place. And also, I've changed the format just a little bit today. I noticed that the videos were getting longer and longer, and some of you made comments about it, so I attempted a much shorter and more compact version today. You all will have to let me know what you think. Well, Bretonnia. So, shortly into the year, I think it was almost 2017 when we got Bretonnia, or maybe it was still 2016. It was before the release of Warhammer 2. Bretonnia was just kind of sitting out there, floating around as kind of a half faction that people could use to spam polearms and archers in multiplayer. It really wasn't very anything impressive, but we had been told by Creative Assembly that eventually they would be fleshed out and released as a faction that would be playable, and we also eventually learned that they were going to be a free faction for everyone. So, we were going to get something handed to us for free. Was it going to be any good? Would they be ready for the game? And then, of course, since they came out in Warhammer 1, how do they hold up across Warhammer 2 against all the other factions and DLC that came out for that game? Now, they did eventually get one additional character added, which is Repens de Lyonesse, and we'll see her today too. But folks, let's take a look at the state of Bretonnia in Total War Warhammer 2 just prior to the launch of Game 3. All right, let's start off as per usual. We're going to take a look at the lords available, or in this case, the lords and ladies available to the faction. Bretonnia has 4 legendary lords to keep you busy. You have Lewin, who starts at Coron. We've got Albrecht, who starts in Bordelot. We've got the Fey Enchantress, who starts in Carcassonne. And a bit different, we get Repens de Lyonesse, who starts in the Southlands. Basically on a war of errantry, which is pretty fun. It's like being on a crusade. So good, nice, unique starts here for the legendary lords of Bretonnia. Each has their own faction, and each of these lords is pretty unique. So we'll talk through these. As far as starts and stuff go, Lewin's got an interesting start in Coron. These days, you're going to be seeing a lot of the Dark Elves while you're there too, because of the addition of Rakarth. And he's got an interesting start with Empire and other friendly Bretonnians somewhat nearby, but you'll always be fighting. There are vampires in the vicinity. Norskin raids are bound to happen. Vampirates might show up. So you get plenty of enemies headed your way. And of course, Lewin's faction is going to be focused on cavalry. You can see he gets a bonus to chivalry, and he starts with all knightly vows unlocked. So that's a bonus to him. And then he's going to have extra melee attack when fighting against undead, greenskins, and all chaos. So he gets a bonus versus those specific factions. And then the same thing with leadership. And he's got this passive ability, which is the Blessing of the Lady. It's actually really nice. We'll show a little bit more about this type of stuff whenever we get into the units. But yeah, that's basically Lewin's focus. Albrecht's going to be fairly similar, except that he's going to do a little bit better with income from trade. And then as far as the Lord effects go, he has extra melee defense for Knights of the Realm units, which is going to make them stand up longer in a like kind of a drag out type of fight. He's also a melee lord, very similar to Lewin in many ways, but without the healing. The Fey Enchantress is actually a really fun legendary lord to play. She is a spellcaster and not really much of a melee type focus, but she has a special ability that makes her kind of like a Mortis engine. She can drain the life out of nearby enemies when she's in melee. It's really pretty cool. So if you keep her safe, it's really nice. And then she gets special upkeep reductions for Grail Guardians, which is neat because Grail Guardians are really fun units. And again, we'll talk more about them later, but that's the Fey Enchantress. She does Lore of Life. And again, her start is further south here in Carcassonne. And so she is going to be facing potential threats from the Wood Elves. And then she's also going to be facing potential Estalian armies. Skaven from Skaven Blight, Beastmen now have a start in that vicinity. And there are other factions that are not far off, may even see the likes of one RNS Assault Spite, so there are plenty of enemies in the vicinity for the Fey Enchantress. And then Repens, the most unique start, she's likely to run into Tomb Kings and other enemies in the vicinity. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's like a crusade through the desert. She also gets the added thing that has these errantry confederations, so there's a lot of other minor chapters of knights around her that she can confederate and try and grow up. She gets a big upkeep reduction for heroes, which is kind of neat. But, I mean, she is on a crusade. So vampire counts, coast, and kings all hate her because she's out there slaying all these undead evil foes that are tainting the land. As far as lord effects go, she has certain vows unlocked when she starts. And then she's got physical resistance for peasant units. It's not much, only 5%, a little bit of leadership. And then she's got this halo of maidenly wrath. So it's interesting. Let's go on to the campaign map, though, and take a look. As soon as we go over here to the Eye of Vortex, the Bretonnians do have an Eye of the Vortex start with Rapans, so they do have that. But let's go load in a campaign and take a look at how their mechanics work and see whether those are up to snuff. All right, so Bretonnia's mechanics on the campaign map. They have this chivalry kind of currency, and you can get chivalry by winning big battles, and you get even more if you win larger, but you can also lose chivalry if you do unchivalrous things, like sacking settlements. Those are things that a chivalrous lord would not do. So as chivalry builds, it has ever-increasing benefits, including being able to call on the legendary Green Knight, which is a legendary hero that's available as an ethereal knight unit that is quite good. And then in terms of what else makes Bretonnia unique on the campaign map, it's going to be their peasant economy, which is heavily focused on the peasants. If you recruit them all into your armies, you won't have as many, and thus your economy won't produce as much. So the Bretonnian economy is based heavily on these farms, and the farms are where you can recruit the different peasant units, including the archers, which are quite good, and you'll probably want some of these peasant archers. But again, if you recruit them, then the peasants aren't working the fields, and you lose money, right? So you can see how that works. But you can see these estates here. There's a bonus going on depending on that peasant economy. Right now, it's 7 out of 10. So you can see they're actually producing an extra 30% income right now out of these farms, which can add a lot of income. Now, there are other buildings in that building tree real quick where they can earn money. You can do industry instead if you want to use industry, but then it kind of cancels if you build the farm. You're not supposed to have both going at once. It looks like you're supposed to focus on one or the other. You can either do the farming or the industry. Then there's buildings that help buff that, like the water wheel is what you need to help upgrade farms all the way, and of course it adds to them. And then they have other buildings like these apothecaries. So it's all a peasant-based economy, which is pretty cool. I mean, because it is supposed to be like a medieval type faction, and that just makes sense. So is this stellar? Not really compared to a lot of factions, but it's something. They have kind of a faction currency / mechanic up here. Puts them on par with other basic Game 2 type stuff. And remember that this is a Game 1 faction. Bretonnia had been added fairly, I wouldn't say fairly late, but later into Game 1. And so they seem to play just fine in Game 2. And they seem like they're in an okay place, all things considered, here on the map. Let's go take a look at their roster real quick. All right, here we are in the Bretonnian roster. I'm not going to cover things in quite as much detail. I realized that I started covering every single unit, and it was taking forever, and I think that's kind of aside from the point. And someone was like, hey, Air, all these episodes are getting longer. And it's like, you know what? You're right. So let's not get bogged down in it. Let's just talk about things as a general level. Bretonnia from an infantry standpoint. Their infantry is trash. It's cheap, it's peasant infantry, and aside from foot squires, nothing here is going to really be that impressive. It's cheap, though, and so that's Bretonnian infantry in a nutshell. Cheap, but weak. They have cheap missile infantry, which is not terrible, and so Bretonnians are decent in a missile infantry duel because they have a lot of peasant archers at a pretty affordable price, and they even have a fire and poison version of them. So decent in missile infantry, even though it doesn't look all that impressive, which is 3 units there. Now, where Bretonnia makes up the strength of their roster is going to be in cavalry. They have access to a ton of different kinds of units of cavalry, starting with Knights Errant and working all the way up to Grail Knights, and then even flying units like the Royal Pegasus Knights and Royal Hippogriff Knights. So they have a ton of options. They have anti-large options. They have armor-piercing options. They have flying anti-large options. And they have flying armor-piercing options. So the Bretonnians are actually quite good in both an air force and on a ground cavalry force. They're very powerful. This is where the strength of their army comes from, and quite honestly, that's not terribly surprising. This is a faction based all around medieval chivalry, and their knights are their strength, so go figure, right? Big surprise. They have excellent knights, though. Lots of good ones. That's where the strength of their roster really lies. Missile cavalry, they have some bow horsemen, and nothing special. And then they've got a couple of trebuchets, a field trebuchet and a blessed trebuchet that shoots magic, and it's slightly better. Very thin roster, honestly, with Bretonnia. Now, this was a free faction. The CA added free, so this was added after the game came out. It was free to whoever already owned the base game. So we didn't necessarily expect the CA put, like, they're all into it, but for a free faction, they're there. Their roster's not stellar, but it's workable, and they're a decent faction. I would say for me, they're pretty low tier in multiplayer. If you're a pretty skilled player, you can usually make something of them, but I have a difficult time using them in multiplayer. They're decent in campaign. They do lack very good infantry, but you upgrade foot squires enough, you throw a bunch of knights in there, and then you've got good lords with solid mounts, and you should be in good shape. And speaking of heroes and lords, Bretonnia has access to beast, life, and celestial magic, which is pretty nice. Those are some good lores. I think celestial or heavens took a bit of a hit whenever Wind Blast got nerfed, but it's still fun because of the Comet of Kazandora and some of the other spells that come associated with it. You can get those as heroes. Felix and Gotrek are available to them. Paladins are a nice hero unit that gives some good anti-large capability at a pretty affordable price. And the Green Knight is a really cool legendary hero. Then from a generic lords, you get a standard Bretonnian lord, and then you can get prophetess units, which are basically a spellcaster lord that you can bring in the form of these prophetess. And then that leaves our 4 legendary lords, Albric, who is like a slightly cheaper version of Lewin, but still quite capable. He actually has a bonus versus infantry, I saw it wrong. He has a bonus versus large when he is not mounted. His mounts can go up to Timpete, which is his hippogriff that he can be mounted on. So pretty cool unit there. And when he is on the hippogriff, he does pretty nice damage. He's anti-large focus. Lewin on his hippogriff Beaky here, he doesn't have the anti-large, but Lewin does have this Blessing of the Lady where he gets extra physical resistance. And he's also got this Lady's Champion here, which gives him healing. So Lewin can heal. Albric is more specific anti-large, but they're similar in their capabilities. Then we have Rapance, who is basically a questing knight as a lord. She's good against infantry and armor. And then she has a mount here, Suleiman, which is her, I think it's a unicorn that she rides on. So it's pretty cool. Neat ability. Makes her a lot better against infantry and makes a potential fun pick of her here. See, she's got this Sword of Lioness where she can do extra damage as well. So fun addition, again, to a free faction as a free LC. You don't say no to free in a game like this because free is actually free. We talked about Lewin. So the Fey Enchantress, Silvaron, her unicorn, basically gives her speed. She's got Lore of Life. And as far as special abilities, the Chalice of Potion is basically like having a bound Comet of Cassandora. And then she has this right here, the Mist of the Lady, which is like a Mortis Engine effect that also takes away melee attack. Really handy and makes them fun. So there's a lot of diversity in the 4 Bretonnian lords, enough so that it's fun. Again, this is a free faction. Let's go talk about a final verdict for them. I'm going to do things a little different. We did things a little shorter here. So how does Bretonnia stack up? Are they ready for Game 3? Well, this is an interesting one for me because Bretonnia was free. I would say they're kind of on the low end in terms of like unique and interesting mechanics and a fully fleshed out roster. They're not amazing, right? Bretonnia isn't going to blow your mind with the number of units or just the sheer diversity or anything else like that. They do have 4 unique campaign starts in Mortal Empires. That's really nice. And 3 of the starts are in the same general vicinity, but they do play out differently. And then Rapance is quite a ways off with something totally different. So I don't know, not bad, not stellar. Again, the roster, not bad, not stellar. I think it's enough to get by. And like I said, CA handed it to us for free. So they're fine. I think that's where I'm at with Bretonnia. They're not amazing. They're fine. I think it would be cool to see Bretonnia get some stuff added to them. So let's say that in the future we get a new DLC for Game 3, and in Game 3, maybe 2 paid factions or Game 3 factions get some DLC, and maybe as the free content, CA could add a little more to Bretonnia. I'm not sure about their lore, so I don't know all the tabletop units that they have that should be present that aren't present. So again, I couldn't speak to that, but I'm sure there is stuff. Like CA has rarely ever had a faction where they added literally everything that was ever seen in tabletop. So I imagine that there are things that could be added for Bretonnia, and I would like to see that happen. So are they ready for Game 3? Sure. Like there's a bare minimum there to get them into Game 3, but they need more. And I, for one, would love to see a little more come to Bretonnia and make them even more ready for Game 3. They are a fun faction for those especially who enjoy some heavy cavalry play. I think that you'll have a good time with them. And their campaigns are serviceable, but I don't think they're anything to write home about. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Bretonnia. What do you all think? Where do you think they stand? Do they need more? Do they need less? I mean, that would be mean to take units away, right? Tell me if you think I got it right or whether I got it wrong. HeirofCarthage signing out, and I will see you lords and ladies at Bretonnia soon in the next video with our final Game 1 faction.